At the dealership, my dad pressed the finance form into my hand like it was nothing more than a grocery list. "Just sign it," he said, his voice carrying that edge I'd known my whole life. "It's for your brother." My mom's nails dug into my arm, sharp enough to leave half-moon marks. "Don't make this difficult, Celeste. Family comes first." My brother Darren leaned back against the salesman's desk, smirking like he already had the car keys in his pocket. I looked at the number on the paper, $39,000. My heart dropped into my stomach. The clerk's eyes flicked to me. He was young, probably my age, and for a split second I thought I saw pity there. My fingers shook as I pulled a sticky note from my purse and scribbled quickly. "They want me to co-sign a $39,000 loan." I slid it across the counter like a spy in a bad movie. He read it, then looked at me, really looked. He nodded slightly, excused himself to check on something, and left us sitting in awkward silence. My dad's jaw tightened. "Don't pull that stubborn act with me. You've got the job, the credit. Darren can't do this without you." I swallowed hard, trying to find my voice. "I can't. I'm not taking on his debt." "I'm sorry." Darren scoffed. "Wow. Real nice. Guess it's too much to ask your perfect little life to help your family out." Mom's grip on my arm tightened until I winced. What kind of daughter abandons her brother like this? "He's your blood." The clerk returned with a bland smile. "Sorry, folks, there seems to be a processing delay. It might take a couple of days before we can move forward." He shot me a glance I'll never forget, an unspoken run while you can. I stood up, every muscle in my body trembling. "Then I guess we'll wait. I need to go." My dad slammed his palm against the desk. "Ungrateful," he spat. "After everything we've done for you." I wanted to laugh, to scream, to tell him that everything was just a pile of guilt and manipulation. Instead, I forced myself to walk out, each step heavy and hollow. The sunlight outside felt harsh, almost mocking. My legs carried me to my car, but my mind was spinning. The words they'd thrown at me clung like burrs. Selfish, ungrateful traitor. I sat behind the wheel, hands gripping it so tight my knuckles went white. For a moment I almost went back in. Almost gave in the way I always had before. But something inside me, something small and shaking but stubborn, held on. As I drove away, the dealership shrinking in my rearview mirror, I knew this wasn't over. My family would come for me, the way they always had, with their guilt and their rage. Only this time, I wasn't sure I could survive another round. And yet, I also knew something else. By not signing that paper, I had just taken the first step in saving myself. When I walked through the door that evening, the air in the house felt heavy. My dad was pacing near the living room, his jaw tight, like he'd been waiting for me. "You've shamed this family," he said the moment I set down my bag. His voice was sharp, like he was spitting out every word. I opened my mouth to explain, but before I could, Darren jumped in. "You're selfish, Celeste. You think you're better than us? One little favor, and you act like it's the end of the world. I would have done it for you." His tone dripped with mockery. He knew I wouldn't argue because he always had a way of twisting things, so I came out looking wrong. I turned to Mom, hoping she'd step in. She sat on the couch, arms folded, eyes fixed on the TV that wasn't even on. She didn't say a word. That silence stung worse than their shouting. Finally, she looked at me, her eyes watery, her voice soft but sharp. "What kind of daughter abandons her family?" Then she turned her head away again, leaving me standing there as if I didn't belong. I tried to hold my ground. "I can't risk my future for this. I'm not the one who wanted the car." My words came out shaky, and I hated that they did. Dad's face hardened. "Ungrateful," he muttered, shaking his head. "We gave you everything, and this is how you treat us?" The guilt hit hard, even though I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. I felt like I was being pushed into the role of the villain. Darren had made mistake after mistake, and somehow the blame always landed on me if I didn't help clean it up. That was the pattern. He caused the mess, and I was expected to carry the broom. Later that night, I called Marina. She was the only person I could talk to without being judged. I poured out everything. The yelling, the cold stares, the way Mom's silence made me feel like a stranger in my own family. Marina listened carefully, then sighed. "Celeste, you can't let them drag you down. They know you'll give in if they keep pressing. That's why they keep doing it. You have to protect yourself, or they'll sink you too." Her words steadied me, but they also scared me. I had always believed family meant safety. Now it felt like the people who were supposed to protect me were the ones trying to break me down. When I hung up, I sat in the dark of my room, staring at the ceiling. My chest felt tight, torn between fear and defiance. A small part of me wondered if I should have just signed the paper, taken the easier road, kept the peace. But another part whispered that if I'd given in, I would have lost more than money. I would have lost myself. Still, as the silence of the house closed in again, I couldn't shake the doubt. What if they were right, and I was the selfish one after all? One evening after work, I sat at my desk with my laptop open, unable to shake the unease that had been building since the dealership. Something told me to check my credit report, even though I'd never had a reason to worry before. I entered my information and waited for the page to load. When the results appeared, my breath caught in my throat. There was an account listed that I had never opened. It wasn't small either. A credit card with a $12,000 balance stared back at me. Payments had been missed, late fees piled on, and the account had been open for over a year. My hands trembled as I scrolled, reading every line again and again, hoping I had made a mistake. But there was no mistake. It was under my name, my social security number, my responsibility. At first, I thought maybe it was fraud by a stranger, some hacker somewhere who had gotten lucky. But the address listed on the account matched my parents' home. My stomach dropped. The only people who could have done this were the very people I trusted most. The drive to their house felt endless. My heart was racing, but I forced myself to confront them. When I walked into the living room, my dad looked up from his chair. "What's wrong with you? You look pale," he said, almost annoyed. I held out the printed report with shaking hands. "Do you know anything about this? There's a card in my name with $12,000 on it. I never opened this." Mom glanced at the paper but didn't flinch. "You must have forgotten, Celeste. People forget things all the time." Her tone was calm, almost rehearsed. "I don't forget opening a credit card," I said firmly. "This is fraud." Darren, lounging on the couch, let out a short laugh. He didn't even bother to hide it. The smirk on his face told me everything I needed to know. Dad leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Why are you making such a scene? It was for the family. You're acting like this is some big crime." The room spun for a moment as their words sank in. Not only had they stolen my information, they were trying to convince me it wasn't real. I could feel my chest tighten as if the walls were closing in. "You've been stealing from me," I whispered, half to myself, half to them. "No one's stealing from you," Mom said quickly, her voice sharper now. "Stop being dramatic. You'll pay it off eventually. It's not the end of the world." The casual way she said it broke something inside me. I had expected denial, maybe even regret, but not this indifference. They didn't even see it as wrong. Darren leaned back, arms crossed, watching me unravel like it was some kind of show. In that moment, I realized the truth. The fight at the dealership hadn't been about one loan. They had already crossed the line long before. They hadn't just asked me for help. They had taken it without permission, and they weren't sorry at all. For the first time, I understood just how deep the betrayal went. I sat in my apartment with the credit report spread out across the table, staring at the numbers that weren't mine. After days of restless nights, I finally decided to file a fraud claim. The process felt cold and mechanical, forms to fill, statements to sign, calls with people who spoke in practiced tones. Still, I felt a small relief knowing I had taken a step to protect myself. I didn't tell anyone. My family didn't deserve to know what I was doing. But secrets never lasted long in that house. Somehow they found out. Maybe a letter came in the mail, or maybe Darren overheard something on the phone. Whatever it was, the reaction came fast. I walked into their living room one evening and was met with Mom's tear-streaked face. She cried loudly, rocking back and forth like I had committed some unforgivable sin. "How could you do this to us?" she sobbed, her voice thick and trembling. "We are your family. You're dragging us through the mud." Dad stood behind her, his fists clenched, his voice booming so hard it shook the walls. "You've crossed the line, Celeste. Filing reports against your own blood? You're nothing but a traitor." His face was red, his words sharp, each one hitting me like a slap. Darren leaned against the doorway, arms folded, a grin spreading across his face. "This is classic you. Playing the victim while you stab us in the back. I can't wait to see how far you think you'll get with this little plan." His mocking laugh made my skin crawl. I tried to defend myself, explaining that I hadn't opened the account, that it wasn't right to make me pay for something I never agreed to. My voice cracked as I spoke, but it didn't matter. They weren't listening. They never listened. As the shouting grew louder, the space between us shrank. My dad stepped forward, jabbing his finger into my shoulder. "You're destroying this family. When I didn't back down, he gave me a shove, harder than I expected. I stumbled, hitting the edge of the wall. For a second, I couldn't breathe. The room blurred around me, voices overlapping in anger and contempt. Something in me snapped. Without another word, I grabbed my bag and ran out the door, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the handle. The night air felt cold against my skin, but it was the only thing that grounded me. I drove straight to Marina's. When she opened the door, I fell into her arms, the tears spilling before I could stop them. I told her everything, the fraud, the shouting, the push that sent me over the edge. She listened quietly, her arms holding me steady. Finally, through the sobs, I whispered the words I had never dared to say out loud before. They've taken enough from me. I'm not forgiving them this time. My voice was hoarse but steady. Marina pulled back just enough to look me in the eyes. Good, she said firmly. Then let's make sure they never get the chance again. In that moment, something hardened inside me. For the first time, I wasn't just hurt, I was ready to fight back. The days after that fight felt heavy, but instead of falling apart, I forced myself to act. I went through every drawer, folder, and email I had, digging for anything with my name on it that didn't look right. Old bank statements showed strange charges I didn't recognize, all leading back to addresses tied to my parents. I made copies, slid them into an envelope, and tucked them away where no one could reach them. Each paper felt like a piece of truth I couldn't let disappear. I knew words alone wouldn't mean much, so I tried something different. The next time my dad called, his anger poured through the line. He went on about how I was making a scene out of nothing. I set my phone to record, holding it close to my chest as he shouted. Then came the slip I'd been waiting for. We just needed it for Darren. You'll get over it. The moment he said it, I froze. My stomach twisted, but I also felt a sharp sense of relief. It wasn't just in my head. I finally had his own voice admitting it. Later that night, I sat at Marina's kitchen table with everything spread out between us. Piles of papers, screenshots, the audio clip saved to my phone. She picked up one statement, shaking her head. This is more than a mistake, Celeste. This is theft. You can't ignore this. She began helping me sort it all into neat stacks, labeling envelopes so nothing would get lost. Watching her handle it so carefully made me feel less alone, like someone finally believed me. But even with all the proof in front of me, part of me hesitated. My parents had raised me, fed me, kept a roof over my head. The thought of taking them to court felt like cutting away the last ties holding us together. My chest tightened every time I thought about it. Would I be the one destroying what little family I had left? Marina leaned over, her voice steady. You didn't destroy anything. They chose this the moment they used your name without asking. They're the ones who broke it. The next day, I scheduled a consultation with a consumer lawyer. Walking into the office, I felt like a child again, nervous and unsure. The lawyer was calm, direct, and didn't sugarcoat anything. After looking over the documents and listening to the recording, he leaned back in his chair. This is clear fraud. You have every right to sue for damages, and we can get these accounts removed from your record. Hearing him say it out loud made the knot in my chest tighten and loosen all at once. On one hand, I finally had someone telling me I wasn't crazy. On the other, it meant taking a step I could never undo. That night, sitting alone in my car before driving home, I stared at the stack of files on the seat beside me. My hands gripped the wheel, shaking. I whispered to myself, they already took my trust. What else is there left to save? It was the first time I admitted the truth. Protecting them meant losing myself, and I couldn't let that happen anymore. I signed the agreement with the lawyer after one long night of staring at the ceiling, knowing there was no turning back. The sound of my pen scratching across the paper felt heavier than anything I had done before. Within days, the first round of documents was filed. It didn't feel real until the process server showed up at my parents' doorstep. The calls started almost immediately. My dad's voice thundered through the phone before I even said hello. You've turned into a snake, he hissed. After everything we did for you, this is how you repay us? Taking your own family to court. He slammed the line dead before I could answer. Not long after, my mom flooded my phone with messages. She cried into the voicemail, telling me how I had broken her heart, how I was tearing the family apart. I can't believe my own daughter would do this to us, she wailed, her voice shaky and raw. Then, instead of speaking directly to me, she carried the story to every cousin, aunt, and uncle she could reach. Soon enough, whispers spread faster than I could keep up with. At first, the relatives reached out politely, wanting to hear my side. but most of them already believed hers. Your parents only wanted to help Darren, one aunt said. Why are you dragging them through court like criminals? The words stung. No one asked what had been taken from me. No one cared that my future had been put at risk. They only saw me as the daughter who turned against her family. Darren added fuel to the fire, calling me greedy every chance he got. She just wants money. That's all this is about. He acted like he was the victim, like he hadn't been living off lies. The more he spoke, the more people sided with him. Soon, it felt like a whole wall of voices was shouting against me, while I stood alone. Every message, every glare, every story twisted to make me look heartless chipped away at me. Some nights, I sat on the floor with my back against the bed, scrolling through the cruel words sent by relatives I once trusted. The loneliness wrapped around me until I could barely breathe. One evening, when it all felt too heavy, I drove to Marina's. She found me sitting in my car outside her place, my eyes swollen from crying. Without a word, she pulled me inside and set a mug of tea in front of me. I told her how the family had turned against me, how I felt like I was fighting a battle I couldn't win. She listened, then said firmly, "Let them talk. Lies don't last forever. Truth will stand, even if it feels shaky right now. Keep going, Celeste." Her words didn't erase the pain, but they anchored me. For the first time in weeks, I let myself believe I wasn't wrong to fight. I might have lost the family's approval, but I still had my dignity, and that was worth protecting. The courtroom felt colder than I expected. I sat at the long wooden table beside my lawyer, clutching the folder that held months of work. Across the aisle, my parents and Darren sat together, a united wall of anger. Their eyes locked on me with such intensity that I had to look away. My heart raced, but I told myself to breathe. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. My lawyer began by laying out the basics of the case, speaking with calm confidence. Then it was my turn. My hands shook slightly as I handed over bank statements and documents that proved the accounts were tied to me without my knowledge. Each page was another piece of proof that my name had been used. Next came the recording. The audio echoed through the courtroom, my dad's voice saying, "We just needed it for Darren. You'll get over it." Hearing it play aloud made my stomach twist, but it also gave me strength. There was no denying it anymore. When Darren was called to the stand, he tried to act smooth. He claimed he knew nothing about the account, that I was exaggerating. But under questioning, his story shifted. He contradicted himself more than once, stumbling over dates and amounts. The judge's expression hardened as the lies unraveled. My lawyer pressed further, pulling out records of Darren's spending. Gambling transactions, overdue bills, overdrafts. It was all there in black and white. The quiet murmurs in the courtroom grew louder as the truth surfaced. Darren's face flushed, his confidence slipping away with every detail revealed. Through it all, my parents glared at me. My mom's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't the kind that came from guilt. They were the kind meant to cast me as cruel. My dad sat rigid, fists clenched, his stare heavy and unrelenting. It hurt, but I kept my gaze forward. When closing arguments ended, the judge leaned back in his chair and spoke firmly. He declared the evidence undeniable. The debts tied to my name were to be cleared immediately. My parents were held responsible for damages, and Darren's behavior was formally documented as reckless and harmful. The weight of his words washed over me. I had won. For a brief second, relief filled me. But then I looked across the room. My parents wouldn't meet my eyes. Darren shook his head, muttering under his breath. The victory felt hollow as the gap between us grew wider than ever before. After the session ended, I stepped outside into the crisp air. Strangers passed by, unaware of the storm I had just walked through. My lawyer congratulated me, but his words faded into the background. I had cleared my name, yes, but the cost was visible in every angry glare I'd faced inside that courtroom. As I stood on the courthouse steps, I realized there was no going back. The law had given me justice, but my family had given me exile. And somehow, both truths had to exist at once. The judgment was barely a week old when the final blow came. My parents stood in the doorway of their house, faces hard as stone. My dad's words were sharp and final. "You're no daughter of ours." My mom stayed quiet, but her silence said enough. I waited for some sign of hesitation, but there was none. The door closed behind me, and I knew it was the last time I would stand there as part of their family. Not long after, Darren's car was hauled away. The lender repossessed it after months of missed payments. He stormed onto social media, posting long rants about how I'd ruined his life, painting himself as a victim. Friends of his echoed his anger, repeating his words like they were gospel. The truth didn't matter. In his eyes, I was the reason he had nothing. The whispers spread quickly. Relatives who used to invite me to holidays stopped calling. A cousin texted once, asking, "Why couldn't you just let it go?" Others avoided me altogether. It was easier for them to side with my parents than to accept the uncomfortable reality of what had really happened. My name became a cautionary tale at family gatherings, a warning about what happens when you go against your own. Every glance, every message chipped away at me until I felt like there was no place left to stand. So I made the decision to leave. I packed my small apartment into boxes, rented a truck, and drove away from the city I had grown up in. The road stretched ahead, unfamiliar and quiet, but it carried me somewhere they couldn't reach. The first night in my new place was strange. The walls were bare, the rooms empty except for the essentials, but the silence was different here. It wasn't filled with judgment or threats. It was just silence, and for once that felt like peace. I sat on the floor with a single lamp glowing and let the reality sink in. I had no parents to call, no brother to lean on, no cousins dropping by. I was on my own. The devastation hit hard. I cried until I couldn't anymore, mourning a family that was still alive but already gone from my life. Yet underneath the grief, something else stirred. It was small, almost fragile, but it was their freedom. No more sudden calls demanding money. No more guilt trips. No more being pushed into corners I couldn't escape. For the first time, I felt the weight lifting. The cost had been brutal, but I finally had space to breathe. The ties that once chained me down were gone, and though the emptiness hurt, it also left room for something new. For the first time in years, I belonged fully to myself. Months passed, and distance slowly built a shield around me. I kept my focus on work, bills, and the small routines that gave me comfort. One morning, while scrolling through local news on my phone, a headline caught my eye. Darren's name was there, tied to an arrest for theft. My stomach tightened, but I didn't feel the shock I thought I would. Instead, there was only a dull ache, like I had expected this path for him all along. By the afternoon, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Missed calls stacked one after another, all from my parents. I let each one go unanswered. Then the voicemail started. My mom's voice filled the recordings, shaking with desperation. She pleaded for me to come back, to help post bail, to save Darren from a mistake she claimed wasn't his fault. Her sobs poured through the speaker, but I couldn't bring myself to call back. I sat on the couch, phone in hand, listening until the last word cracked into silence. For a moment, I almost gave in. The old guilt stirred, whispering that I should step in. But then I thought of everything that had been taken from me, all the times I was forced to carry their choices. With a deep breath, I pressed delete. The messages vanished, and with them, the weight I had carried for years grew lighter. That evening, I met Marina at our favorite coffee shop. The second she saw my face, she knew something had happened. I told her about Darren's arrest, about the calls and the voicemails I had erased. She reached across the table, her hand steady on mine. "You're free now, Celeste. Don't let them pull you back into their chaos. They've shown you who they are." Her words settled into me like a truth I had needed to hear out loud. In the weeks that followed, I focused on myself in ways I never had before. I found a therapist and started unpacking the years of pressure and betrayal. Each session felt like peeling off a layer I had been forced to wear. I also met with a financial advisor, setting goals that once seemed impossible. My credit report finally looked clean, and for the first time, I started saving for things that were mine alone. The quiet of my new life didn't feel empty anymore. It felt steady. I learned to enjoy mornings with coffee by the window, weekends without drama, evenings where my phone stayed silent. Slowly, I began to understand what peace actually felt like. Letting go hadn't been easy. There were nights when memories crept in, when the pull of family weighed on me. But each time, I reminded myself of the choice I had made. I chose myself, and that decision gave me the kind of freedom I never thought I'd know. Years passed, and life slowly became mine again. I worked hard, saved carefully, and built stability piece by piece. The day I signed the papers for my first home, I felt a kind of victory I couldn't explain. It wasn't just about owning a place. It was proof that I had survived everything meant to break me. The house was simple, with a small porch and a quiet street, but to me it felt like a fortress. I filled it with things I chose, not hand-me-downs or reminders of the past. Every room echoed with freedom. I thought the chapter with my family was long closed, But one afternoon, the past showed up at my door. I opened it to see them standing there, my parents, older and worn down, and Darren lingering behind them, looking hollow. My dad's proud stance was gone, replaced with tired eyes. My mom clutched her hands together, frail and trembling. Darren looked beaten by years of poor choices, his debts hanging on him like chains. They didn't shout this time. Instead, they pleaded. My mom's voice cracked as she asked for forgiveness, for help, for something I no longer had to give. My dad muttered about mistakes. Darren avoided my eyes. Their downfall was written all over them, money gone, health fading, futures burned out. I stood in the doorway, listening. A younger version of me might have let the guilt win. But the person I had become understood the truth. They had made their choices, just like I had made mine. I owed them nothing now. I told them quietly that I hoped they found peace, but they would not find it here. Without raising my voice, without anger, I closed the door. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't break. I simply turned back into my home, the life I had built without them. Standing in my living room, sunlight spilling through the window, I felt the final weight lift. They once tried to make me carry their mistakes, their debts, their endless chaos. But I carried myself out instead. That choice was my freedom, and closing that door was the best signature I ever gave. Do you think I made the right choice by walking away from my family for good? Or should I have opened the door and given them one last chance? I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to hear more stories like mine, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next one.